Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 72. The Monster Wolf. No, the monstrous beast demon wolf lying dead with its snout torn off. It wasn't released to be killed. It was released for them to survive against it. But to think it was dead. It was truly unbelievable. For a moment, everyone was at a loss for words at this sight. Then a red-belted warrior asked the exhausted boys, "Who did it?" At his question, the boys' gazes naturally turned towards a certain someone. Although they all looked similar, there was one exceptionally handsome boy who was drenched in blood from head to toe. It was Mok Jaeyoung. Is it that guy again? The eyes of the red-belted warriors flickered with interest. Although they were already interested in him due to his performance in the steel bead competition, they couldn't help but be surprised by this. "Senior, does this make sense?" One warrior muttered as if he couldn't understand. That was understandable. Even without the energy points being sealed, it seemed difficult for a decent warrior to handle a monstrous beast of that size. But to think he did this to it in a state where his energy points were blocked? No matter how much one trains their outer force, this is impossible. It was questionable whether one could face it even with proper gear. The most senior warrior among the red-belted warriors looked Mok Jaeyoung up and down. While the other boys looked haggard and exhausted, he alone had lively eyes. No, he didn't even look tired. Could it be? The senior warrior's eyes narrowed with suspicion. He then spoke. "Come here. Is there a problem? Who said you could talk back?" Mok Jaeyoung shrugged and approached the senior warrior. Then the senior warrior roughly grabbed Mok Jaeyoung's wrist and checked the state of his body. It was to confirm whether his energy points were blocked or not. However, they're blocked. He wondered if the guy had somehow unblocked his energy points, but that wasn't the case. They were still blocked. Confirming this made it even more unbelievable. They raced such a guy in a mere place like Yun Mok Sword Manor? No matter how famous the martial arts family was, it wasn't a major faction like the Nine Paths or the likes. This was going to be quite controversial. It was the first time since the operation of Corpse Blood Valley. The robe-wearing diviner looked dumbfounded at the corpse of the monstrous beast demon wolf with its snout and head torn off, completely separated from its lower jaw. To make matters worse, right when the sun rose, he had used a technique to signal the demon wolf to return. But when it didn't return, the diviner, sensing something was off, had climbed up here. Then someone spoke to him. "Is this possible?" "Pardon? I asked if it's possible." The one asking the question was none other than the Lord of Corpse Blood Valley wearing the demon mask. Arriving late and climbing the mountain, he had received a report from the red-belted warriors and arrived here to check the demon wolf's corpse. He too couldn't help but be inwardly surprised. In the first place, the role of the monstrous beast demon wolf was to be an ordeal for the boys. It was to push them to an even more extreme situation and maximize their will to survive. But to think they killed it. The robe-wearing diviner couldn't give any answer. If a warrior who had mastered martial arts had done this, he would have at least responded. It seems he possesses quite an extraordinary martial prowess. But this was truly unexpected. Should I even mention this? What was even more troublesome was the state of the demon wolf. It had already achieved maturity. He already thought it was getting close to a mature state anyway. But he believed it wasn't ready yet and it would take a couple more months, so he had deployed this beast. However, in that short time, it had become a fully mature body. It had turned from a fierce beast into a monstrous beast. This is crazy. How did they do this? Even trained diviners and third-rate or second-rate warriors had a hard time dealing with ferocious beasts. But if it became a monstrous beast level, even first-rate masters would have a hard time catching it unless they joined forces. He couldn't believe that one of the boys whose energy points were sealed had caught it. He had to report this, but the diviner couldn't bring himself to do it. That's because even ferocious beasts alone could be considered an extreme ordeal, but a monstrous beast level would be close to a massacre, even with the protective space of the flag. Should I consider it lucky? It was fortunate that this beast was killed before it could cause more harm. However, it was difficult to fully report this fact. So he excluded this and said, "To be honest, even I don't understand how they caught it." "You don't understand? In your opinion, which part of the human body possesses the greatest strength? Are you trying to say it's the mouth?" "That's right. The biting force is the strongest. Let alone beasts or such beasts. Do you think it would be any different? Those called beasts have lived wild lives unlike humans, and accordingly, they are equipped with jaws capable of chewing through even bones. Humans cut hard bones and eat them. However, many of the creatures called beasts eat bones whole. In that case, naturally, the shape of their teeth and their biting force had to develop accordingly. If they were lucky and pierced its core, which could be called its heart, with something sharp, I could understand. But this is impossible with just a bit of strength. To tear it apart, one needed a force that surpassed the biting power of the monstrous beast demon wolf. The demon mask nodded at this. I see. Who did it? Please tell me. That's enough. Pardon? Didn't you hear me? I said that's enough. Take that corpse with you. He had heard what he wanted, so there was no need to mention it further. I understand. Then I'll borrow a few men. Do as you please. As the diviner took the corpse with the help of a few warriors, the senior warrior who served as his assistant approached him with a frown and said, I checked. Are the Golden Gate locks still in place? Yes. With the energy points blocked, the true energy couldn't circulate through his body. But he did that. Calling him strong is an understatement. He might be even stronger than that child of the esoteric realm gate. Was this something that could be explained by him being strong? The demon mask had experience fighting against what was called a fierce beast in his younger days. If he referred to those memories, it was still questionable. To think he did this without inner energy. I'll have to keep an eye on him. He thought he was no ordinary fellow, but this made him even more interested. There seemed to be something about him that couldn't be explained just by his background from a famous martial arts family. The demon mask changed the subject. Have the rest all gathered? Yes. What's the total number? The total number of survivors is 259. Out of the total of 468, about half had died. Upon receiving this report from the senior warrior, the demon mask nodded and moved his feet. Climbing to the top of the mountain ridge, there was a large clearing where the boys were sitting in rows and columns. But this was just the number of survivors. They were divided into two groups here as well. Out of the 259, 200 were on the right side, and the remaining 59 were on the left side. The majority of 200 had relaxed faces, while the remaining 59 were pale and trembling. The reason was that they were the ones who failed to find a flag until sunrise. Damn it. Is this how we die? That's why they were afraid. The result had already been foretold. It was death. The demon mask standing in front of them opened his mouth. I congratulate you on successfully defending the flags. The 59 pieces of trash on the left side have also worked hard to survive the night without being able to do anything. Even the words that were supposed to be respectful were different. In fact, these words didn't register with the 59 boys. They just wanted to live. As they were doing so, the demon mask turned his head towards them. Thump, thump, thump. Their hearts pounded loudly. The moment the demon mask gave the order, it seemed like the red-belted warriors would immediately behead them. However, the 59 pieces of trash follow that diviner down the mountain. At this order from him, the eyes of the 59 boys widened. They naturally thought they would be killed on the spot, but being told to follow that robe-wearing diviner down the mountain made them puzzled. Could it be that they were being spared? Murmur, murmur. The faces of these boys began to light up. Seeing this, the red-belted warriors shook their heads. Being told to follow the diviner was by no means a good thing. They didn't want to tell them what was to come, as they were so happy about briefly extending their lives. Shut up and get lost. At the demon mask's scolding, the rejoicing boys shut their mouths. Of course, they were still smirking. And so, the 59 boys followed the procession, collecting the corpse of the demon wolf and the bodies of the dead, pulling a cart down the mountain. Why are they making those expressions? There must be something. Although those who went down wouldn't know, the 200 boys who roughly grasped the situation by looking at the expressions of the red-belted warriors felt fortunate that they weren't included in that group. As they were doing so, the demon mask spoke again. Now, it's time for another selection. Selection. The faces of the boys who had been relieved at the word selection became puzzled. Of course, not all of them were like that. Some teams were inwardly cheering as if they had guessed the situation. As they were doing so, the demon mask pointed to the left side and said, "Those who have grasped the true meaning of the flags Move to the left side. True meaning. What is he talking about? Murmur, murmur. The boys stirred. Then some of them got up from their seats, and with a triumphant expression they moved to the left side. Of course, Mok Jae-un's team was no exception. Seeing the boys who had moved, a few teams tried to follow suit to the left side without knowing the reason, thinking, oh well, I don't know. However, if you follow without knowing the true meaning and get caught, you'll be executed on the spot. Flinch. They had no choice but to stop at this warning. And so, the boys were divided into left and right sides once again. Out of the 280 boys were on the left side, and 120 boys were on the right side. What the hell is this true meaning? Does this mean we didn't pass? The 120 boys on the right side couldn't hide their anxiety. It was due to the fear that if they didn't pass here, they might die, as the term selection was used. As they were doing so, the demon mask looked at the boys remaining on the right side and said, "This is the limit for you lot. But be grateful. You lot have now become low-ranking warriors of the Heaven and Earth Society." At this declaration from the demon mask, the boys' eyes widened. They were the ones who had been afraid that they would die for failing to pass the gate. But it was a completely unexpected result. However, relieved that they wouldn't die but had survived, some of the boys sat down on the ground as if their legs had given out. We survived. Corpse Blood Valley, where most of those who entered were known to leave as corpses. The exhilaration of surviving here was too great. On the other hand, about half of them didn't seem to be in a good mood, their expressions souring. That was because, damn it, a low-ranking warrior. The goal of most of those entering Corpse Blood Valley was never to become a mere low-ranking warrior. The purpose of risking their lives to pass the gates was to be chosen. But they had failed at this. Stupid things. You took the test too simplistically. Seeing them, the 80 who had grasped the true meaning of the gates looked at them with mocking expressions. They had gained the qualifications to go to a higher place. As they were doing so, the demon mask took something out of his bosom. It was a silver tablet with the character 2 written on it. The eyes of a few, including Yeom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, sparkled upon recognizing this. It was a badge given to the one who passed the gate at the top of the class. Is he going to determine the top scorer? If that was the case, they couldn't help but be interested. They had prior information that having that badge would be quite advantageous in the end. But unlike the steel bead competition, there was nothing particularly superior about this one. The only thing was the fact that they had discovered there were 2 types of flags, but even this was too many with 80 people. What will he do? As they were wondering about this, the demon mask muttered, "How should I determine the top scorer? Should it be the one who memorized the verse?" At these words, a few, including Yeom-jae, perked up their shoulders. That was because they were the ones who had succeeded in memorizing the verses in advance, having secured the 2 types of flags with verses early on. If it was like that, they were confident. Or should it be the one who can best demonstrate the verse? With the following muttering, some of the perked-up shoulders sank. Although they had barely memorized the verses while defending and seizing the flags all night, they didn't have time to practice. This was the same for Yeom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave and Yun Moo-woong of the Esoteric Realm Gate. They could immediately demonstrate the stances according to the memorized verses, but they weren't confident in demonstrating them perfectly as it would be their first time. In fact, it would be the same for anyone. Still, the conditions are the same. If they were told to demonstrate the stances, they were going to try it no matter what. As they were doing so, the demon mask said, "Good. Let's do it this way. Is there anyone among you who can properly explain what kind of verse is on the flag?" At that question, someone raised their hand and stood up first as if they had been waiting. Swoosh. "It's a sword technique." At this shout, snickers burst out from here and there. That was because anyone who had memorized or at least seen the verse would know that it was a sword technique. Is that even worth mentioning? Just by looking at the demon mask's cold gaze, the boy realized he had made a mistake and quietly sat down. Then Yeom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave raised his hand and stood up. It's a swift sword art where offense and defense are integrated, targeting 3 acupoints on the center line and 6 major acupoints, and the variation of stances is diverse depending on its use. At Yeom-ga's explanation, Yun Moo-woong of the Esoteric Realm Gate smacked his lips regretfully. The others felt the same way. He had concisely and accurately explained the characteristics of the sword technique. No further explanation was necessary. How about that? Yom Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave looked at Mok Jiangun and Yun Wuwung of the Esoteric Realm Gate in turn with a triumphant expression. There was no need to even look at Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall, as she was lying down receiving treatment. He was confident that this badge would be his. The demon mask opened his mouth. To think you figured it out to that extent in the midst of all this, not bad. Got it. Yom Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave inwardly cheered. Judging by the demon mask's reaction, what he had figured out seemed to be correct to some degree. Mok Yuchion's eyes flickered with interest. He didn't speak up first because he had no particular desire for the top spot. However, more than that, he has a keen eye for reading the verses. It was almost identical to what he had grasped. Although the guy was cunning, his talent in martial arts definitely didn't fall behind his own when compared. He became curious about what level he would be at once the Golden Gate lock were removed. As they were doing so, the demon mask glanced at the senior warrior of the captain rank. Then the senior warrior also nodded his head. In any case, these were people who had fought in the flag defense battle for nearly 3 hours without resting or sleeping, engaged in a fight to the death. It was plenty impressive that they had figured it out to this extent. The demon mask held out the silver tablet and said, "Good. This gate." Before he could even finish his words, "Isn't it a sword formation rather than just a sword technique?" The demon mask frowned and turned his head. Who just said that? As he was wondering, the one who said those words was none other than Mok Jiangun. Ha! At this, the demon mask clicked his tongue as if dumbfounded. That was because this sword technique had simple stances, so it was impossible to distinguish whether it could be demonstrated as a sword formation or not just by looking at the verses. At the very least, it was difficult to notice unless one was a swordsman who had reached a high level with the sword. But a greenhorn brat distinguished this just with the verses? What? Yom Jie, who had inwardly sneered at the abrupt mention of sword formation from Mok Jiangun's mouth, was taken aback. But what the hell was this reaction from the demon mask? Chapter 73, Could It Be? Yom Jie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave frowned, feeling uneasy inside. The reaction to Mok Jiangun's words about it being a sword formation was unusual. If it wasn't the case, there would have been no reason to react like that in the first place. That can't be. Yom Jie denied it inwardly. A sword formation, as the name suggests, is a formation deployed using swords. Formations typically have fixed rules and precise variations in stances to interlock with each other, which was difficult to achieve with just the sword technique verses. That meant the verses' stances had to be adapted, but this was impossible to envision in one's head just by looking at the verses unless one was at a considerable level. Is that guy such a master of the sword? To be able to notice this just from the verses, one had to be a sword master of the caliber of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave's Valley Master, Yom Ga's father. That's why Yom Ji hoped it wasn't the case. However, contrary to his wish. Why do you think it's a sword formation? The demon mask asked Mok Jiangun in a serious tone. Mok Jiangun then nonchalantly said, "Judging by how the stances of the sword technique adhere to the basics and each one is arranged so that the movement paths don't overlap, I thought it could be demonstrated as a sword formation." The movement paths don't overlap. The demon mask's eyes narrowed. Even if one could physically demonstrate the sword technique multiple times or visualize the sword in one's mind, it was quite difficult to trace the movement paths to the point of combining them into a sword formation. It was more than observing one's own movements. The demon mask stroked his chin. To be honest, it was hard to believe. A guy who was merely 17 or 18 years old had insight on par with someone who had reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Of course, if he possessed innate talent, it could be possible. However, those hands. The palms of Mok Jiangun's hands that the demon mask was looking at were not like that at all. Those were not the hands of an exceptional swordsman. The shape of a swordsman's thumb, index finger, and pinky naturally changed after gripping a sword for a long time. But looking at Mok Jiangun's hands, there weren't even any calluses on his thumbs. Those aren't the hands of someone who has mastered the sword. Yet such insight emerged from him. If a sword master had given him pointers, it would be understandable. But there was no way such a person existed here in Corpse Blood Valley. That's why it was even more puzzling. Was this guy's discernment really on par with someone who had reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship? The demon mask, who had been staring intently at Mok Jaeongun, said, "If a sword formation were to be deployed with this verse, how many people do you think would be most efficient?" It was already impressive that he had guessed it was a sword formation. But could he really figure this out as well? If he got this right too, one could truly say his insight regarding the sword was on par with a master. At this question, Mok Jaeongun remained still for a moment and then answered, 8. The demon mask's eyes flickered with interest at those words. He had accurately stated the minimum number required to deploy a sword formation. Then Mok Jaeongun continued, 16 or 32 should also be possible. At those words, a small gasp escaped the demon mask's mouth. It would have been impressive if he had only said 8, but he even accurately guessed the numbers that could form the sword formation. Do you think it would be difficult to go beyond that? If they were to combine, the formation would start to overlap from that point on. At Mok Jaeongun's words, the demon mask sincerely clicked his tongue. The Heaven and Earth 8 Resonance Formation. That was the name of this formation. It was an absolute formation based on the variations of the 8 trigrams, developed by the previous society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society, allowing 16 to 32 swordsmen to launch a combined attack. Look at this guy. He even got this right. Did he really possess the eyes and insight of a swordsman who had reached the pinnacle? If that was the case, he was genuinely intrigued. He didn't care at all that Mok Jaeongun was from an upright martial arts family. The demon mask, who had been staring intently at Mok Jaeongun, licked his lips. He wanted to satisfy that greed right away, but now, during the ongoing examination, was not the time. Smack. The demon mask threw something at Mok Jaeongun. Mok Jaeongun caught it and opened his palm to find a silver tablet with the character 2 engraved on it. The demon mask said, "You are also the second-place scorer." Murmur, murmur. At those words, the boys watching this stirred. With Mok Jaeongun claiming the second-place position following the first, it naturally became a topic of discussion. Just who was this guy? What was his background that he had already taken the second-place position? Grit. Yeomjae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave gnashed his teeth. He had naturally thought the second place would be his, but he didn't expect it to be snatched away like this. He was one of the 3 most promising disciples from the major factions in this corpse Blood Valley. But now he looked pathetic. Mok Jaeongun. That guy's name was completely etched into his mind. It seemed like he would only feel better if he could somehow get back at him for this humiliation. Just wait and see. Once the Golden Gate lock sealing his energy points were removed, that guy better be prepared. As they were doing so, the demon mask spoke. "I sincerely congratulate the 80 of you who have passed the second gate. You have gained the qualifications to become middle-rank warriors of our Heaven and Earth Society." Middle-rank warriors. At his words, exhilaration filled the eyes of some boys. That was because starting from middle-rank warriors, the treatment within the Heaven and Earth Society changed. Among the middle-rank warriors, those with exceptional skills could gain the qualification to lead a unit of low-rank warriors as a unit leader. The demon mask continued speaking to them, whose eyes had come alive despite their exhaustion. To be a middle-rank warrior, one must have the ability to lead a unit and be able to execute a sword formation. As you just heard, the verse on the flag is the verse of a sword technique that requires at least 8 people to deploy as a sword formation. At those words, everyone's eyes flickered with interest. The examination wasn't simply composed of extreme trials. From the beginning, there was a reason why they had to be divided into teams of 8. Now, if you have a keen eye, you should be able to guess what the third gate is. You there? At the demon mask's nod, a boy abruptly stood up from his seat. Yes. What do you think the third gate is? That's... Speak properly. It's for the 8 members who pass to deploy a sword formation and eliminate the target. At the boy's words, most of them nodded slightly, thinking the same thing. That was the only thing they could guess at this point. As they were doing so, the demon mask gestured for him to sit down and opened his mouth. Correct. The third gate is for a team of 8 to perfectly deploy a sword formation and eliminate the target. At his words, the boys inwardly felt relieved. The first and second gates had made them harm each other and exhausted them mentally and physically. If they were told to do it twice, it would be an experience they never wanted to go through again. However, there are conditions and restrictions here as well. Conditions and restrictions? First, you will be given a day of rest, so decide on a team leader during that time. Of course, you must also form a team of 8, including the team leader. Huh. At the demon mask's words, the boys furrowed their brows. This meant that the 8 who had defended the flag didn't necessarily have to be on the same team. In this case, they could reorganize the teams. Great. At this, a few openly cheered. Among them were Yeomjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave and Mok Yuchung. In fact, most of them who had been inwardly dreading being on the same team as Mok Jaeungun again showed similar reactions. By the way, the one who becomes the team leader naturally passes the 3rd gate regardless of the sword formation test, and swoosh. The demon mask took out a square wooden tablet that looked like an identity plate from his bosom and showed it. The words Unit Leader were engraved on it. Oh, could it be Unit Leader's plate? The boy's eyes focused on the wooden tablet. Then the demon mask chuckled and continued. They will also be given the qualification of a unit leader. At the demon mask's words, the boys couldn't hide their excitement even though their mouths were closed. Only a select few among the middle-rank warriors who had the qualifications of a senior could become unit leaders. But were they deciding the unit leaders here? However, a question arose in everyone's mind as they were getting excited. Then won't everyone want to be the team leader? Who among those who had come this far wouldn't want to be the team leader? Realizing this, sighs of distress naturally mixed into the boys' breaths. They thought this gate might be a bit better, but in the end it seemed like they would have to fight again. Damn it. There are 80 people, so only 8 will qualify. Even that's uncertain. If someone dies while fighting for the team leader position, that team will be eliminated. If even one person met with an accident, 7 others would be eliminated together. It couldn't be considered easier than the 2nd gate by any means. As they were doing so, the demon mask spoke. Now I will state the restriction. The restriction is no killing. At those words, everyone was puzzled. Did the restriction of no killing literally mean they couldn't kill each other? Everyone looked at the demon mask in confusion. They thought he would clarify the reason behind it. However, that is all. That's it. So we have to decide on a team leader without killing? Everyone was dumbfounded by the simple yet different restriction compared to before. On the other hand, Mok Jaeungun smacked his lips as if he was disappointed. He thought he could enjoy it like the 2nd gate, but with the restriction on killing, the fun was gone. This guy. Why is he disappointed? Seeing his reaction, the boys next to him clicked their tongues inwardly. Shouldn't he consider it fortunate instead? At least in this gate there wouldn't be any loss of life. Clank. At that moment, the red-belted warriors began taking out a peculiar-shaped iron object from a wooden box. The demon mask pointed at it and said, "Before heading to the lodgings beyond the mountain, we will collect the Golden Gate lock." Ah. At those words, everyone's expressions brightened. They had been wondering how long they would have to wear the Golden Gate lock, but they were finally being freed from them. The restriction of not being able to use inner energy made them more uncomfortable than they had thought. Finally, the lips of Yeomjie of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave twitched. He had waited so long, and the restriction on his inner energy was finally being lifted. Yeomjie glared intensely at the back of Mok Jaeungun's head in front of him. He couldn't respond to that strange technique due to the restriction on his inner energy, but now that the restriction was being lifted, the situation would change. "I'll make you crawl between my legs." The restriction on killing was in place, but it didn't matter. As long as he didn't kill him, it was fine. Thinking about this, his mood became so good that the corners of his mouth curled up cruelly. Beyond the mountain there was a lodging building where they could rest. It was structured so that 2 people could rest in one room, so the boys each found someone they liked and chose their rooms. It didn't take very long. During this one-day rest period, the behavioral tendencies of the boys were divided into 2. The boys of the first tendency ate the snacks prepared in the room to satisfy their hunger, and then without exception, they all began circulating their energy. They had fought a bloody battle all night, exhausting their minds and bodies, so they tried to restore their bodies to normal as much as possible through energy circulation. The boys of the second tendency were different from them. Although they also had a strong desire to rest, they judged that it was better to move first and secure teammates. Therefore, they attempted to approach the boys who were originally on the same team as them or those they had in mind. They were making a move in advance as the competition would intensify soon. And here a third tendency also existed. Crack. Yom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, who had satisfied his hunger, stretched his body. He strongly wanted to circulate his energy like that guy sitting on the bed out of fatigue, but he judged that now was the right time, so he had to hurry. Now is the chance. His target was that bastard Mok Jae-eun. As long as he didn't kill him, he could turn him into a cripple, and then he wouldn't have to worry starting from this gate. The other guys couldn't match up to him anyway. However, that guy's strange technique and his unusually annoying presence bothered him. So I'll strike first. Now that the restriction was lifted, he was confident. Although that guy had learned a strange technique, Yom-jae had reached the peak realm and had also mastered the Vermilion Slaughter Cave's secret arts. Then shall we start the hunt? After stretching, Yom-jae grabbed the door and opened it. Hover. Mok Jae-eun was standing in front of the door with a smile on his face. You. Oh my. It seems we had the same thought. A smile filled with malice. For a moment, Yom-jae, who had been confidently stepping out, felt a chill run down his spine. Chapter 74. Inside a red room illuminated by candlelight. This place was a brothel located on the outskirts of the outer fortress of the Heaven and Earth Society. On the table were red and white powder along with brushes for applying makeup. There was someone looking at these with a serious expression. It was Ha Chai-rin, the prospective leader of the Flying Killing Sect, one of the 3 major assassin groups, or rather Go-chan, who had possessed her body. Thud. Go-chan with his interlocked fingers supporting his chin. The face reflected in the mirror was so captivating that it could be called beautiful. However, this was not his own appearance. Do I have to go this far? Looking at the cosmetic tools on the table, Go-chan fell into self-loathing. How did it come to this point? As a servant spirit, his fate was tied to Mok Jae-eun, so he had chased after him all the way to the Heaven and Earth Society. In fact, if it were up to him, he wanted to run away, but since his life and death were tied to his master Mok Jae-eun, he had no choice. Damn it. Go-chan let out a deep sigh. Somehow he had made it all the way to the outer fortress of the Heaven and Earth Society. But when he actually tried to infiltrate the Heaven and Earth Society, he didn't know the security would be this strict. It's impossible. Even during his assassin days, he occasionally had infiltration missions. No, most assassinations required stealthy infiltration to be carried out. However, the scale of the Heaven and Earth Society, which currently controlled 1/3 of the martial world, was beyond imagination, and it was on a completely different level from the small and medium-sized sects he had infiltrated before. With trembling hands, Go-chan reached for the brush to apply the powder. The reason he was grasping these cosmetic tools was simple. It was to infiltrate the Heaven and Earth Society. Shudder. As he gripped the brush, Go-chan felt goosebumps all over his body. It was due to the deep-seated aversion inherent in his soul. The thought of him, a man, coming to this brothel to disguise himself as a courtesan made him feel so strongly repulsed that he even felt nauseous. However, there was no other way. In order to infiltrate, Go-chan had wandered around the outer fortress of the Heaven and Earth Society, gathering information. He had also considered the method of secretly entering the carts carrying supplies or food, but it was impossible because they thoroughly inspected them at the gates of the Heaven and Earth Society. In the end, the best method was to make contact with an insider and enter that way. Oh-ho. So you're saying the young lady has come of age and wants to meet the heroes of the Heaven and Earth Society, is that right? That's right. Even though it was to gather information, to think he had to say such things. Even as he said those words, he felt uncomfortable. But it won't be easy to meet gentlemen of the rank of team leaders or division leaders, not just low-level warriors of the Heaven and Earth Society. Is there no way? Do you want to know? Ahem. Subtly extending his hand. As expected of an information broker, he had a keen eye for money. At this, Go-chan placed silver coins in his hand. After receiving the silver coins, the information broker readily divulged the method. Do you know Crimson Orchid House? Crimson Orchid House. That's right. It's a brothel located on the eastern outskirts of the outer fortress, and there... Bang. Are you telling me to become a courtesan? For a moment, it was so absurd that he almost snatched the money back from the information broker. The information broker appeased Go-chan and said, "Oh my. Listen to people until the end. Although Crimson Orchid House is a brothel, it's not an ordinary pleasure district. What's the difference between a brothel and a pleasure district? The courtesans there are not only outstanding in appearance but also excel in academics, arts and skills and possess dignity, so even high-ranking gentlemen from inside the fortress visit. Is that true? After receiving the silver coins, would I lie? With the young lady's appearance, Crimson Orchid House will welcome you with open arms. Trusting these words, Go-chan eventually infiltrated Crimson Orchid House. As the information broker said, he had concerns, but he succeeded in entering Crimson Orchid House. When asked if he had any skills, he recalled the times he had disguised himself as a musician during his assassin days and played the Jiamungo, and they truly welcomed him enthusiastically. You have artistic skills. We always welcome female musicians. On top of that, they mentioned that a few courtesans had become concubines of the Heaven and Earth Society's division leaders, creating vacancies. Concubines, huh? It seems infiltration into the inner fortress is possible somehow. Go-chan swallowed dryly. And after hesitating several times, he finally picked up the brush and started applying powder to his face. Before long, the voice of the head courtesan of Crimson Orchid House could be heard from outside the door. Are you ready? Well. Go-chan, who was applying red powder to his lips, fumbled. Then, as if impatient from waiting outside, the head courtesan finally opened the door and entered. Creak. What's taking you so long to do your makeup? Since you have a pretty face, you can do it roughly. See. How well did you do it? At these words, Go-chan looked at his own face in the mirror and couldn't hide his perplexity. He had tried his best, recalling Hachiren's memories, but his hands must have shaken too much due to the instinctive aversion. The head courtesan approached and looked at Go-chan's face. Then she soon frowned and muttered. Oh my goodness. He had applied so much powder that his face was as white as a corpse. He had applied the ink so sloppily with the small brush meant for darkening the eyes that black tears were running down below his eyes, and he had drawn the red powder on his lips too long, making it look like his mouth was torn up to his ears. You've made yourself look like a demon. Go-chan no longer looked like a beauty but a ferocious demon. At the sight of the head courtesan clicking her tongue, Go-chan gritted his teeth. How did he end up doing something like this? Seduction, my ass. It might have been better to risk his life and infiltrate instead. Mok Jaeun was standing in front of the door with a smile on his face. Seeing him like that, Yeomji was momentarily taken aback and at a loss for words. A smile filled with malice. The moment their eyes met, Yeomji felt a chill down his spine. The restrictions were lifted, allowing him to freely use his internal energy, so why was he being overwhelmed by the ominous aura emanating from this guy? In an instant, Yeomji gritted his teeth. He had intended to step forward, vowing to make the guy a cripple, but he was suddenly taken aback and felt like his momentum was stolen because the guy had appeared out of nowhere. As his displeasure intensified, Yeomji spoke with a terrifyingly distorted face. What do you mean by having the same thought? Is there any other reason? What? I thought you looked useful, so I was considering taking you as a teammate. Grit. Yeomji ground his teeth and slowly raised his internal energy. And he spoke to Mok Jaeun in an agitated voice. You're going to take me as your teammate? Yes. Actually, I've been wanting to kill you since yesterday, but since the restriction of no killing is included in this gateway, I thought it would be better to just exploit you. Yeomga's eyes fiercely darted around. What nonsense was this impudent bastard spouting? Saying he wanted to kill him but it's better to exploit him? Grit. His teeth involuntarily ground together. Now that the internal energy restriction was lifted, how many among the boys did he think could compete with him? Yeomji couldn't hold back any longer. Swish. Yeomji, who had already completed the circulation of internal energy throughout his body, reached out his hand toward Mok Jaeun's neck. He intended to grab his neck with his right hand, suppress his acupoints with his left hand in an instant and drag him into the room. However, thwack. Ugh. Before he could do that, Mok Jaeun's foot struck Yeomga's abdomen. It happened so fast that he couldn't even see it. Veins bulged on Yeomga's face and his skin turned red as if it would burn. You bastard. Aren't legs longer than arms? Smack. Yeomji tightened his abdomen and kicked his toes toward Mok Jaeun's femoral nerve. At this, Mok Jaeun bent his leg and slightly retreated backward. Not missing that moment, Yeomji pushed off with his opposite foot, rotated his body, and tried to strike down on the top of Mok Jaeun's head. Whirling kick. It was the third stance of the Vermilion Heaven Foot technique, which the Vermilion Slaughter Cave prided themselves on. It was a stance that deceived the path by raising the kick upward and then instantly rotated the body to strike downward. It was difficult to dodge because it was extremely fast and mixed with feints. However, swish. Mok Jae-eun lightly moved half a step and twisted his body to avoid the whirling kick. Yeomga's eyes narrowed. He never thought he would be able to dodge it so easily. But a stance is meant to be connected, so the next one was ready. Whoosh. Yeomjae twisted his body and thrust his sword fingers toward Mok Jae-eun's Adam's apple. Having reached the peak realm, he could form sharpness with his energy, even if not as much as an actual sword. This is called piercing energy. Swish. However, whoosh. The piercing energy was about to pierce through Mok Jae-eun's Adam's apple. But before it could even touch, thwack. Mok Jae-eun's foot kicked Yeomga's leg like lightning. It was just a simple kick, so Yeomji didn't dodge it and instead sent internal energy to his leg to form a repulsive force. Based on his senses, he was superior to this guy in terms of internal energy. So if he protected his leg with internal energy, he thought he could sufficiently endure it. Thwack. Ugh. Yeomga's body, whose leg was kicked, instantly half-rotated to the side and his head slammed into the floor. For a moment Yeomjae was dazed. What on earth just happened? He couldn't understand why he couldn't dodge this guy's kick. It was fast, but the moment they collided, the repulsive force scattered. What? While he was doing that, Mok Jae-eun smiled and said, "You're weaker than I thought. You bastard." Yeomjae, whose anger had risen to the top of his head, flicked his arm and rose to his feet while simultaneously aiming his kick technique at Mok Jae-eun's neck. Swoosh. Smack. Mok Jae-eun easily dodged it, then grabbed Yeomga's head and slammed it into the floor. Crash. The floorboard shattered and Yeomga's head dug into the floor. It was painful, but Yeomjae couldn't bear the humiliation, so he pulled up his internal energy to the fullest to try to raise his head again. But strangely, the energy focused on his neck and head scattered little by little, and he felt his strength drain instead. What is this? It was difficult to understand what phenomenon this was. While he was doing that, Mok Jae-eun grabbed Yeomga's hair and pulled it. Yank. As the embedded head was pulled out, sharp wooden splinters pierced various parts of his face and blood flowed down. Looking at Yeomga's face like this, Mok Jae-eun smirked as if satisfied. "Your face looks a bit better now." What did you do? "What do you mean, what did I do? Don't tell me you used something like scattered energy poison?" Scattered energy poison? At Yeomga's words, Mok Jae-eun countered with a puzzled expression. He prided himself on knowing almost everything about poisons unless it was unusual, but it was the first time he had heard of something called scattered energy poison. Scattered energy poison. It was a strange poison made through a special manufacturing method that scattered internal energy once the conditions were met. Don't play dumb. If it's not scattered energy poison, then why is my internal energy scattering whenever I come into contact with you? Whenever he collided with Mok Jae-eun, the internal energy in that area scattered. At first he thought it was just a coincidence, but when it happened twice he couldn't help but think of scattered energy poison. Was there such an interesting poison? Is this bastard toying with me now? Yeomjae, whose anger had reached the top of his head, soon gritted his teeth. Now that it had come to this, he thought he had no choice but to use the secret technique of Vermilion Slaughter Cave. The secret technique was an assassination move that inevitably killed the opponent, so he was told not to use it unless it was an exceptional case, but he couldn't bear it any longer. Thump thump. Yeomjae concentrated his internal energy toward his chest. Then the strange patterns drawn on his upper body glowed red. But at that moment, thwack. Ugh. Mok Jae-eun pulled Yeomga's hair back and smashed his fist down. But that wasn't the end. As if he was going to shatter Yeomga's face, Mok Jae-eun kept striking with his fist. Thwack. Pick. Stop. Thwack. P. Thwack. Crack. The sound of his nose breaking and teeth shattering could be heard, but he didn't stop. Thwack. Whack. Whack. There was no time to use the secret technique or anything. With the continuous strikes to his face, Yeomjae had already lost consciousness. Ha! At that moment, hearing a sound from behind, Mok Jae-eun turned his head with his fist raised. There was a boy who had woken up from the sound of fighting while circulating energy and refining his breath. What is going on? The boy couldn't hide his bewilderment when he saw Yong-jae with his hair grabbed by Mok Jae-eun's hand and his face turned into a bloody pulp. Toward this boy, Mok Jae-eun waved his blood-stained hand and said with a smile, don't mind me and just continue what you were doing. Chapter 75. Don't mind it and just continue what you were doing. Mok Jae-eun, who was flicking his blood-stained hand and speaking nonchalantly. At this sight, the boy didn't know what to do. He was already happy to be staying in the same room as Yong-jae from the Vermilion Slaughter Cave even for a short while, but in no time at all he ended up in that state. What the hell is that guy? He fully acknowledged that Mok Jae-eun had particularly stood out until the second gateway. But now the restriction on internal energy was lifted. Yet to do that to Yong-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave, whose internal energy restriction was lifted, not just anyone else, was that guy a monster? Mok Jae-eun paid no attention to the boy's reaction. Rather, as if he was done with his business, he grabbed the hair of the unconscious Yong-jae and dragged him out into the corridor. As the boy tried to get up thinking he should stop this, "Why? Do you want to follow along too?" Mok Jae-eun asked. At this, the boy faltered and, in his bewilderment, involuntarily shook his head rapidly. "That's not it. You're wise. Then just stay there." Thud. As the door closed, the boy slumped onto the bed as if the strength had left his legs. He had no confidence to follow and help Yong-jae. Mok Jae-eun, who had come out of the room, looked at Yong-ga's face and let out a small groan. The face that had been reduced to a pulp was quite prominent. The moment he saw Yong-ga's tattoo glow red, he instinctively felt that the opponent was trying to kill him, so he had made him like this. "You shouldn't have been so rough." "That's true." At the blue spirit's voice, Mok Jae-eun muttered softly. He had intended to beat him moderately and make him a teammate, but this went beyond the moderate level. However, apart from this result, there was one thing that differed from his expectations. Was the peak realm this week? After the restriction on internal energy was lifted, among the 80 boys, there were 7 who were estimated to have reached the peak realm. One of them was Yong-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave. The reason Mok Jae-eun had chosen Yong-jae as his first target was not only to have him as a teammate but also to test his own strength against him, who was showing explicit hostility toward him. But he was weaker than expected. He was slow. Even when he was in the Yun Mok sword manner, even if he could see the movements of those called first-class masters, his body's reaction was slow. But now the movements of Yong-jae, who could be called the peak realm, felt slow. "That's what I want to say, mortal." The blue spirit was also inwardly surprised by the unexpected result. Although he had opened the middle danjian through the subtle principles of the 8 thought-shattering techniques and his murderous energy had reached the pinnacle of peak realm in terms of internal energy, she had predicted that he would be on par or slightly ahead because he lacked enlightenment. However, Mok Jae-eun had completely overwhelmed Yong-jae. Is this guy's martial talent far exceeding my expectations? After confirming this, the excitement wouldn't subside. Although it was still far off, if this rate of progress continued, it was definitely worth looking forward to. Inwardly, she wanted to reveal her thoughts, but if the mortal became arrogant and neglected enlightenment. Don't jump to conclusions. Although he subdued him quite easily this time, that stupid guy's carelessness played a big part in it. At the blue spirit's words, Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders. There was some truth to her words. It was too early to determine the skill of a master who had reached the peak realm based on Yong-jae alone. But it's getting interesting. What is? I was curious how the energy of death would work, and now it has been confirmed. At these words, Mok Jae-eun recalled what Yong-jae had said. If it's not scattered energy poison, then why is my internal energy scattering whenever I come into contact with you? Those words had been quite puzzling. Can you tell why that is? It seems to be offset by the energy of death. Offset? Yes. You said you experienced the phenomenon of energy dispersing when others injected true energy to occupy your acupoints or check your body's condition, right? Yes. The energy you possess is completely opposite to the energy of living humans. So you're saying that energy was offset because it's completely opposite? That's how it should be seen. The energy of yang and life will invigorate vitality, but your death energy rather brings death. Perhaps that further caused the energy to disperse. That had been the assumption so far. Since this was unprecedented in the history of the martial world, even she couldn't know exactly how this death energy would affect things in the future. But if this energy could really play the role of scattering the opponent's energy like scattered energy poison, it was as if a tremendous natural enemy had appeared for martial artists. It seems quite useful. To Mok Jaeongun, who was pleased, the blue spirit said, just in case, make sure to control it. Control. Yes. If it becomes known that you can scatter the opponent's energy, you may face the vigilance of everyone before you fully mature. That could be the case. As she said, martial artists might become wary. If they were to fight Mok Jaeongun, their internal energy would scatter during the fight, putting them at a significant disadvantage unless they possessed superior strength. How do I control it? Phew. Your learning order is really a mess. The blue spirit clicked her tongue. If he had reached the peak realm through the normal path, he would have properly grasped the method of transmitting energy. But despite being at the pinnacle, Mok Jaeongun couldn't even perform the external meridians, which transmit energy directly, or the internal meridians and foot meridians that send energy within the body. I'll have to keep beating it into him whenever there's a chance. Now that the order was already messed up, there was no other way. While that was happening, they arrived at the lodging room. There was no one in the room. While everyone else was using a room for two, Mok Jaeongun was an exception. Everyone unanimously refused to share a room with Mok Jaeongun, but fortunately there was a vacant room, so he ended up using it alone. Ugh. Just then Yeom-jae, who had been unconscious, woke up, letting out a groan. At this, Mok Jaeongun looked down at him as if it was fortunate and made eye contact. Flinch. Yeom-jae, who saw Mok Jaeongun's face as soon as he woke up, momentarily felt nauseous. That's because while being beaten by Mok Jaeongun to the point where his face became like this, he had fallen into extreme fear that he might die. As a result, he couldn't help but react like this. Have you come to your senses? What the hell? 2e. Yeom-jae felt pain and a foreign sensation in his mouth and spat something out. It was his broken tooth. His entire mouth was numb and filled with the taste of blood, as if he had bitten his tongue several times. Does it hurt a lot? Is that even a question? Yeom-jae looked at Mok Jaeongun with an absurd expression. To him, Mok Jaeongun scratched his head and said, I hit you a bit too hard even though I wasn't going to kill you. But it doesn't seem too bad since you've gotten a more manly face. This bastard now. Is he toying with him? Even slightly moving his facial muscles hurt as if it was being burned by fire. He had made his face like this to the point where it was difficult to even open his eyes. Yet the words he was saying sounded like he was provoking him. To such Yeom-jae, Mok Jaeongun said, How about it? Do you want to join my team? Yeom-jae gritted his teeth and barely squeezed out his voice. Fuck off. He would rather die than ever be with this bastard. Although he knew he was no match, Yeom-jae didn't want to submit to his opponent just because he had lost. At this, Mok Jaeongun lightly clapped his hands and said, Clap clap. An unyielding will that doesn't submit. What a pity. I thought you would be quite useful, so I wanted us to be on the same team. At Mok Jaeongun's words, Yeom-jae, who had been inwardly tense, let out a sigh of relief. He was already worried that this crazy bastard might kill him regardless of the rules if he was in a bad mood. But it seemed he wasn't that impulsive. That was fortunate at least. Let's not associate with him. He had clearly realized it through this incident. This bastard was a crazy one who possessed ominousness itself, just as he had first felt. He knew that nothing good would come out of getting involved or provoking him. Tremble, tremble. Yeom-jae tried to get up to leave the room as soon as possible. But then Mok Jaeongun placed his finger on Yeom-ga's forehead and lightly pushed. It wasn't much force, but Yeom-jae, who was trying to get up, fell back down. Thud. What are you doing? Who said you could go? What? What is he talking about now? He had just spoken as if he was giving up on having him on his team, hadn't he? Then there was no reason for him to stay here. But what was he doing now? Swish. At that moment, Mok Jaeongun took out a wooden puppet from his bosom. And then with one hand he formed a hand seal and chanted an incantation. The origin of fate, the cycle of reincarnation, release. What did he do just now? Yeom-jae, who didn't know much about sorcery techniques, couldn't hide his bewilderment at Mok Jaeongun's strange behavior. So he tried to draw out the energy from his danjian. Damn it. He hadn't noticed, but at some point his acupoints had been occupied. No wonder he couldn't put any strength into his body. While that was happening, a sudden eerie sensation sent chills down his spine. Seep seep. It felt like something was seeping into his body, and the sensation was so unpleasant and chilling that it was hard to endure. Ugh. You? What are you doing to me? Ugh. Twitch twitch. Yeomga's lower back curved like a shrimp. To him Mok Jae-eun smiled and said, I'll make good use of that body. What the hell is that? Ugh. Thump thump. Black veins were bulging out all over Yeomga's neck and face, and his appearance was nothing short of hideous. But it didn't last very long. Yeomga's body, which had been twisting and turning, his eyes rolling back and convulsing, had somehow returned to normal. Of course, when he opened his eyes, someone else had taken residence inside. How is the body? Demonic monk. It seems usable. The vengeful spirit that had possessed him was none other than Demonic Monk. Demonic Monk, who had obtained a young body that had reached the peak realm, showed a satisfied expression. You should have given it to me in a more intact state. At those words, Demonic Monk touched his face a few times, and the broken nose bridge straightened, and the face somewhat returned to its original form. Oh ho! This seemed quite interesting. While the broken parts couldn't be greatly fixed, it had improved considerably. At Mok Jae-eun's reaction, the blue spirit said, adjusting the possessed body to a desired state to some extent is not a difficult task. Unlike humans whose souls are bound, we can freely manipulate the bodies we occupy. It seems so. There seemed to be a way to make use of this as well. While that was happening, thump thump. At the sound of approaching footsteps, Mok Jae-eun looked toward the door. Someone was approaching the room he was in. The footsteps were light in weight, but judging from the somewhat unnatural sound, the condition of the approaching person didn't seem too good. Knock knock. At that moment, someone who had arrived in front of the door knocked. Come in. At this, the door opened and an unexpected person revealed themselves. It was none other than Emo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall. Although she had received treatment, he thought she would be focusing on restoring her body while circulating energy and refining her breath due to her injuries, so why had she come here? At that moment, the green spirit Gyu Soha's voice reached Mok Jae-eun's ears. Master, give me that human's body. It seemed he liked Emo Harang's body. At this, the blue spirit said, You brat. You insisted you were a man, so why are you clamoring for a woman's body? Gyu Soha shut her mouth. Not paying attention to their conversation, Mok Jae-eun said with a light smile. What brings you here? Swish. At that question, Emo Harang's gaze turned to Demonic Monk, who had possessed the body of Yeom Jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave behind Mok Jae-eun. At this, Mok Jae-eun nonchalantly said, this person has agreed to join our team. At those words, Demonic Monk nodded his head, pretending to be Yeom Jae. Seeing this, Emo Harang turned her head toward Mok Jae-eun and said, What did you do? What do you mean what did I do? That's not Yeom-ga. At those words, one of Mok Jae-eun's eyebrows slightly rose. What confidence did this woman have to say such a thing? Mok Jae-eun nonchalantly said, What are you talking about? That guy with a strong sense of pride wouldn't easily submit to you. And Yeom Jae is not the type to go under someone else. At her words, Mok Jae-eun smirked. Come to think of it, he recalled that she was quick-witted enough to quickly deduce his purpose just by seeing his actions during the flag battle. And, didn't she say their eyes met? Emo Harang had said that her eyes had met with the green spirit Gyu Soha. At that time he didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it could have been a coincidence. But if that was true, could this woman also have the talent of a diviner? Mok Jae-eun, who had become interested, pointed at Yeom Jae with a hand gesture and opened his mouth. Then if this person is not Yeom Jae, what is he? I don't know. If you don't know, why did you say that? I saw it. Saw what? That ghost-like thing that was wearing chains next to you. She spoke as if she herself was half believing whether this was true or not. She wanted to know if what she saw was real. If it was true, then this man could be said to be manipulating a ghost, a strange being. Ghost-like thing, you say? At that time my mind was hazy, but I saw you conversing with it. Even as she said these words, she trailed off as if she herself wasn't confident about what she had seen. At this, Mok Jae-eun stared at her with a smiling face. Emo Harang became confused by that sight. As someone from the Demon Fire Hall, known as one of the 4 major assassin groups, she had undergone numerous training, which included the skill to read people's psychology through their expressions and eyes. I can't read him. However, Mok Jae-un's expression and eyes were impossible to gauge. She could read simple emotions, but anything beyond that was impossible. At this, she bit her lip tightly. Is it a misunderstanding? She was telling him about her speculations and what she had seen, but Mok Jae-un showed no particular reaction. Rather, he only showed eyes that seemed intrigued. Because of this, she thought that she might be doing something unnecessary. Therefore, in the end, she said, "Sorry. I must have been seeing things because of the severe bleeding at that time." With those words, she tried to turn around and leave the room. But then, Papapek. The origin of fate, the cycle of reincarnation, release. A sound resembling chanting and incantation was heard from behind. At this, Mo Harang stopped in her tracks and slowly turned her head. Shudder. As she turned her head, goosebumps rose all over her body. Next to Mok Jae-un, she saw a translucent and blurry figure of a girl with half-white hair wearing chains. Ah! What she had seen at that time was real. While she was feeling amazed, the green spirit Gyu Soha stretched out her hand, and chains swiftly wrapped around Mo Harang's body. As her body was restrained by the chains, Mok Jae-un spoke with a smile filled with malice. The price for seeing what you wanted is quite steep, but are you okay with that? Chapter 76. Titan. The eyes of Mo Harang of the Demon Fire Hall trembled. The faint form of chains enveloping her body looked like an illusion, but when she tried to move, they tightened further and restrained her. She tried to draw up her internal energy, but Mok Jae-un approached her and said, "The price for seeing what you wanted is quite steep, but are you okay with that?" A smiling face. But that smile was truly filled with malice. There was no killing intent, so how could he smile like that? In an instant, she recalled a story she had heard before. Among thousands and tens of thousands, there are those born with a murderous nature. What is that? It's a disposition that finds joy, pleasure, and the reason for existence in death and destruction. Isn't that dangerous? It is dangerous. But if they can be properly tamed, they can be said to be the best material for assassins. The best. Yes. Those with a murderous nature have no hesitation in killing someone. That's why they don't get swayed emotionally. So that can become a talent. That was still when the Demon Fire Hall was called one of the 4 major assassin groups. She thought that perhaps Mok Jae-un might be the murderous nature her father had spoken of back then. If that was the case, she might have touched on something dangerous. But that didn't matter. Mo Harang looked straight into Mok Jae-un's eyes and said, "I will pay any price. Any price. If it means uncovering a secret, I'm prepared for it." Prepared. But there's only one life, so can there be any price? Mok Jae-un still had a smiling face. But the words coming out were extremely brutal. "Master. Give me this human's body." The green spirit, Gyu Soha, said with a greedy gaze. Hearing this voice, Mo Harang flinched in surprise and looked at Gyu Soha. At this, Gyu Soha tilted her head and muttered, "Human. You can hear my voice too? Oh ho." At those words, the blue spirit also showed interest. That's because although she deliberately revealed her appearance, she didn't make her voice audible. But being able to hear this meant, it seems the spiritual eye has opened. Spiritual eye? Yes. Unlike you who has opened the demon eye to see the inner essence, it seems you have gained the eye to see souls at the crossroads of life and death. The blue spirit called it the spiritual eye. Perhaps unable to hear her voice, Mo Harang couldn't take her eyes off Gyu Soha. Mo Harang cautiously parted her lips. "Are you really a ghost? What? Do I look like a mere human to you?" Gyu Soha raised the corners of his mouth. The fear of living humans was no different from nourishment for vengeful spirits. However, Mo Harang showed a different emotion than fear. Awe. It seemed elevated somehow. It was close to the emotion felt when seeing something one had been wanting to find. At this, Mok Jae-un said to her, "You're showing an interesting reaction. Is seeing the dead your wish or something?" No. That's not it." Mo Harang's voice trembled. She turned her head to look at Mok Jae-un, and then, as if making a resolution, she spoke with force in her neck. "I will pay any price you want, even if it means my life." At her words, the interest in Mok Jae-un's eyes faded away. Having seen countless deaths, he had come to be able to distinguish to some extent between those who were truly prepared for death and those who weren't, and she was closer to the former. She was prepared to stake her life if necessary. To such Mok Jae-eun she continued. But help me in return. Help you say? Mok Jae-eun muttered as if annoyed. And then, bringing his finger to her throat, he said, Why should I do that? It's just a bother. Press. His finger pressed into where her Adam's apple was. At this she spoke with unwavering eyes. Body. That ghost said it wants a body, right? If you grant my request, I'll give you this body as much as you want. It seems like you're trying to make a deal, but even now I can take your body without having to do that. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Mo Hwarang's eyes sharpened. At that moment, a sharp energy spread from her body. Clang. Clang. Then the chains created by Gyu So-ha's spiritual power were cut off. At some point, sharp daggers were held in both of Mo Hwarang's hands. The daggers were imbued with flickering killing energy, which was honed much sharper than that of Yeom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave. Step back. The blue spirit warned. At this, Mok Jae-eun stepped back about half a step and slightly shook his head to the side. At that moment, several trajectories drew lines in front of his eyes and narrowly grazed past Mok Jae-eun. If he had been a little late, a part of his body including his chin would have been cut off. Oh, it was slightly cut. Trickle. A drop of blood flowed down where the trajectory had passed. Thread. It was much thinner than thread but had elasticity. This thread-like thing tied behind the hilt of the dagger embedded in the floor surrounded the area to prevent movement. Mo Hwarang spoke in a chilling voice. Don't underestimate me too much. Killing intent was emanating from her voice. At this, Mok Jae-eun smirked and said, You had a hidden trick up your sleeve. While that was happening, the blue spirit's voice was heard. I thought I had seen that dagger technique somewhere before, but she has inherited the lineage of the Killing King. The lineage of the Killing King? As soon as Mok Jae-eun's question ended, a glint appeared in Mo Hwarang's eyes. She spoke in a tone of incomprehension. What are you? Mo Hwarang was genuinely amazed. She never thought the words lineage of the Killing King would come out of Mok Jae-eun's mouth. It would be stranger not to think of the Killing King after seeing the linked kill in the flash shadow flying dagger technique. Mok Jae-eun directly repeated those words of the blue spirit. It would be stranger not to think of the Killing King after seeing the linked kill in the flash shadow flying dagger technique. At those words, Mo Hwarang's eyes widened. Many people knew about the linked kill, so there were few who didn't know about it. However, the flash shadow flying dagger technique was different. This was a secret technique that only the sect leader of the Demon Fire Hall could learn. It was literally a secret technique, and since it was not used unless the opponent had to be killed or was too difficult to handle, it was hardly known. And the Killing King is the predecessor of our sect. It's a story passed down only orally within our sect, known only to the sect leader and the successors. So how does he know that? It was in that moment of her confusion. Mok Jae-eun strongly stomped on the floor. Then the floorboard was pressed down and the part where the dagger was embedded rose upward. At the same time, the thin threads tightly surrounding the area loosened. Swish. In this instant, Mok Jae-eun flew toward her in one breath and grabbed her neck. Of course, Mo Hwarang didn't just stand still either. The moment Mok Jae-eun charged, she immediately came to her senses and stabbed the dagger toward Mok Jae-eun's heart, as she had practiced thousands and tens of thousands of times. No, to be precise, only the tip of the dagger slightly penetrated. Fast. Grab. If Mok Jae-eun hadn't grabbed her wrist with his left hand, it would have penetrated even deeper. That's how fast her movements were, making it difficult to respond even when seen with the eyes. It was clear that Mo Hwarang was much stronger than Yeom-jae of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave. Crack. Tremble. As Mok Jae-eun applied more strength to his hand, she frowned at the pain that felt like her wrist would break. Even in the midst of that, seeing her not let out a single moan, Mok Jae-eun chuckled. You're strong. When did you put this around my neck? Slide. A silver thread was somehow wrapped around Mok Jae-eun's neck. The dagger that had been embedded in the floor and bounced upward was hanging from the ceiling, and if Mo Hwarang pulled her hand, his neck would have been tightened. Why aren't you pulling it? You're not squeezing my neck, either. Just as she said, Mok Jae-eun was gripping Mo Hwarang's neck with his right hand but wasn't applying strength. That's why she hadn't pulled the thread either. Honestly speaking, if she pulled this, Mok Jae-eun's neck would be cut off, so she had refrained from doing so. Beyond this point, it was truly the territory of killing each other. If I kill him, It's a violation of the restriction in this gateway. And she still had something she wanted from Mok Jae-eun. That's why she couldn't kill him. Swish. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun released his hand from the neck he was holding and lightly touched her thread with his finger. In that instant, the taut thread soon became limp. Emo Harang's eyes widened. She was definitely sending true energy through the thread, but as if it had dispersed, the thread no longer obeyed her. What is this? She couldn't understand. While she was doing that, Mok Jae-eun said, "You seem quite useful." "What?" "I was going to give you to Soha as a body, but it doesn't seem bad to just use you myself." "What are you talking about now?" "You said you would pay any price for what you want, right?" At Mok Jae-eun's words, Emo Harang momentarily hesitated. She had definitely agreed to that, but perhaps because of Mok Jae-eun's suddenly changed attitude, she found herself hesitating for a moment. But then Mok Jae-eun suddenly grabbed her collar and pulled her. Ah! Crack. And then he forcibly moved her wrist that had stabbed the dagger and twisted it in the direction he was in. She wanted to draw up her energy to block this, but the true energy she sent to her wrist kept dispersing, draining her strength, and she couldn't do anything about it. Crack. At some point, the dagger she was holding was pointed toward her face. Was he really trying to kill her? While that was happening, something fell and wet her lips. It was none other than a drop of blood. Drip drip. Mok Jae-eun's blood, which had been on the tip of the blade, was about to fall into her mouth. When she tried to close her mouth, Mok Jae-eun said, "Open it." What was he talking about? She couldn't understand why he was doing this. However, judging that he wasn't trying to kill her, she soon opened her mouth without questioning it. Then the drop of blood that had been on the tip of the dagger fell into her mouth. Swallow it. She did as she was told. The moment she swallowed the drop of blood that had entered her mouth, her chest became extremely hot. A burning pain was engulfing her body, and it was so agonizing that she forcibly shook off the hand Mok Jae-eun was holding and immediately tried to sit cross-legged. Poison. It's poison. A pain that twisted her internal organs. He was convinced that this was poison. As a descendant of the Demon Fire Hall, known as one of the 4 major assassin groups, she was somewhat well-versed in poisons and had even ingested some deadly poisons to build up resistance to them. However, Mok Jae-eun's blood was incomparable to that. How can blood have such poison? The poison was too strong, as if numerous poisons had been concentrated. The word deadly poison was insufficient. If I don't circulate energy quickly. Smack. As she tried to sit cross-legged, Mok Jae-eun kicked her stomach with his foot. Ugh. The pain of her internal organs twisting was already agonizing, and being kicked in the abdomen made her so distressed that she felt like killing Mok Jae-eun right away. You. Smack. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun pressed down on her shoulder near the collarbone with his foot and said, "You said you would pay any price. Then from this moment on, I'd like you to become a faithful dog. You don't have to go this far." "Ah. No, that won't do. I never trust people." Emo Harang's eyes trembled. She felt like she had made a huge mistake. This person was more twisted than she had imagined. It couldn't be defined as a murderous nature or whatever, it was truly evil itself. The boys who had given up even circulating energy and resting in order to gather teammates and were going around the rooms. They couldn't hide their surprise when they saw a group walking down the corridor. Oh. Is this for real? What? No way. They doubted their own eyes. The two, a man and a woman, followed behind Mok Jae-eun on both sides. They were the descendants of the Vermilion Slaughter Cave and Demon Fire Hall, who were called the most promising in this gateway trial of Corpse Blood Valley. Now that the restriction on internal energy was lifted, everyone had expected that each and every one of them would naturally become the team leader and lead others. But what was this? Could it be that those 2 team leader level individuals had joined under that guy?